On a stormy night in Johannesburg, a woman stood in the rain, soaked, silent, holding a crumpled 100 Rand bill. Her husband had just thrown her out after 9 years of marriage, tossing that note at her feet with a cruel laugh. That's your real worth. But what he didn't know is that same bill would soon become the beginning of her greatest transformation. She spent 40 Rand on a cheap motel room. The next morning, with the remaining change, she bought a lottery ticket, not hoping to win, just to fight back in her own quiet way. She chose numbers tied to her past, their wedding day, his mother's death, her own birthday. Then she folded the ticket, tucked it into her wallet, and moved on. 2 days later, in a damp little room, the numbers flashed on the old TV screen. All of them matched. She laughed, then cried, then prayed, "If this is a gift, please don't let it destroy me." With the help of a fierce female lawyer, she created a hidden trust, claimed the winnings, and rebuilt her life in silence. But peace didn't last. News leaked. Her ex returned with fake apologies and real intentions. He sued. He lied. But she had proof, text messages, witness statements, a neighbor's security footage, and one calm sentence in court: "You had half my life already." She won, not just the case, but her dignity. Today, most of that money goes to helping women like her, and above her modest bed hangs the same 100 Rand bill, flattened, framed, shining like a medal of survival. "I didn't win the lottery," she says. "I found myself. And now, I'm curious. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments so we can say hello to you, properly." Rain fell in sheets thick enough to blur the world into gray. The sound of it striking the tin awning was like 1,000 angry fingers drumming out a warning. The porch light flickered above the narrow doorway of a small Johannesburg house that had once smelled of roasted maize and laughter. Tonight it smelled of smoke, wet dust, and betrayal. Amali stood there, rain streaming down her face, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her suitcase at her feet. Kwame stood in the doorway, his body framed in the yellow light behind him, shoulders squared, eyes sharp and cold. He had once looked at her as if she were the reason the sun rose. Now he looked as if she were something he needed to sweep off his doorstep. "Go," he said. The word came out like iron scraping stone. He hurled her small duffel bag at her. It landed in the puddle by her shoes, splashing muddy water up her legs. Something fluttered from the pocket and landed in the water, a crumpled 100 Rand note, edges soft from too many folds, the face of Mandela distorted by ripples. Kwame's voice cut through the rain. "That's what you're worth." For a moment, she just stared at him. The wind whipped her thin jacket. The rain soaked through the fabric. She didn't answer. Her throat ached, but she swallowed the words pressing there. Silence was all she had left that was truly hers. He slammed the door. The sound echoed in the hollow space where a home used to be. Amali stood alone on the porch, her hand trembling as she bent down to pick up the note. The water was icy, her fingers stiff. When she lifted it, the ink bled faintly under her touch. She stared at that small, torn symbol of value, and her lips tightened until they stopped trembling. The rain didn't stop. It came harder, as if the heavens refused to look away. She turned and walked down the cracked sidewalk, her shoes sloshing through puddles that mirrored the orange glow of the street lamps. Somewhere, a dog barked. Farther down, a taxi splashed by, headlights slicing through the rain, but she didn't raise her hand. She didn't know where to go. She only knew she had to keep walking before her legs gave out. The night air smelled of diesel and wet clay. Her stomach clenched. She hadn't eaten since morning. The last thing she'd cooked in that house had been stew for Kwame's mother, who never once thanked her. She thought of the way Kwame had once whispered, "You're my home." She wondered when that had stopped being true. A group of young men stood under a street awning, smoking and laughing. One of them whistled when she passed. She pulled her jacket closer, her pulse quickening. She walked faster, her steps splashing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Johannesburg at night was a beast of flickering lights and shadowed corners, and tonight it had no mercy left for her. At an intersection, a bus roared past, its tires throwing up a wave of gutter water that drenched her completely. The cold punched through her bones. She shivered, clutching the 100 Rand note in her fist. When the bus disappeared, the city felt too big, too loud, too alive for someone as small as her. She found shelter beneath the overhang of a closed grocery. A flickering street lamp buzzed above, sending thin bands of light across her face. She opened her hand, looked again at the wet note, and let out a small, shaky breath. Somewhere inside her, something hardened. She folded the note and slipped it carefully into the pocket closest to her heart. It wasn't defiance, not yet. It was survival. Quiet, instinctive, the way a seed curls tight beneath frozen soil, waiting. She sat there for a while, knees drawn up, watching the rain streak down the glass of the shop window. Her reflection looked ghostly, hollow eyes, drenched hair, but still breathing. A thin layer of fog gathered on the glass, and she traced a small circle with her fingertip, as if testing whether the world could still respond to her touch. A memory surfaced, a laugh, a song, her mother's voice humming an old hymn while hanging laundry in the sun. "Even the rain feeds the roots," her mother used to say. Amale closed her eyes. The city roared on. When the rain eased slightly, she stood. Her clothes clung to her body. She adjusted the strap of her bag, lighter now without the things she had lost. The small photo frame, the old blue scarf Kwame's mother had accidentally thrown out weeks ago. She started walking again, following the faint glow of a neon sign in the distance. Savannah Budget Lodge. The sign buzzed weakly, one letter flickering out every few seconds. Inside, the front desk was guarded by a tired woman wearing a pink headscarf and chewing gum. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. "I need a room," Amale said, voice low. 40 Rand, cash, the woman replied without looking up. Amale reached into her pocket, uncrumpled the wet bill, and counted. 100 Rand. She handed over half, keeping the other folded tight. The woman slid a key across the counter, pointing toward a narrow staircase. "Room 17, bathroom down the hall, no refunds." Amale took the key, her hand shaking slightly. She climbed the stairs, each creak echoing in the empty hallway. The door to room 17 groaned open. The walls were stained with damp patches, the ceiling light buzzed like an insect. A single bed stood against the wall, covered in a blanket that smelled faintly of bleach and dust. She dropped her bag on the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and exhaled. The silence was heavy, a kind of silence that doesn't comfort, only reminds you how alone you are. From the street below came the faint hum of traffic, the distant wail of sirens, the life of a city that didn't care who was starting over tonight. She untied her shoes, her fingers numb. When she finally lay down, the mattress dipped and groaned. She stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like veins branching across skin. Something in her shifted, not a thought, not a plan, but a slow awakening. The last time she had been this cold was as a child when her father forgot to come home for her birthday. She remembered sitting on the steps waiting, clutching a paper crown she had made herself. Back then, she had told herself he'd return the next day. Tonight, she knew better. Some people never come back. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten. She reached into her bag and found a small packet of peanuts she had kept from the bus ride earlier in the week. They were stale, but she ate them slowly, one by one. Each bite felt like a tiny victory, proof that she was still alive, still able to choose. Her eyes drifted to the window. Through the thin curtain, she could see the rain returning, softer now, like a whisper instead of a storm. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, turning the puddles into mirrors. In one of them, faintly, she saw her own reflection again, blurred but there, not gone. A strange calm settled over her, the kind that comes only after everything breaks. She took out the 100 Rand note, flattened it on the nightstand, and stared at it under the dim light. The paper had dried stiff, edges curled. It was ugly now, but it still held its worth. For a fleeting second, she saw herself in it, battered, discarded, yet still something of value. She smiled faintly, almost against her will. Then her chest tightened and her eyes burned. She pressed her palms together as if in prayer, though she didn't say anything out loud. Outside, a car splashed through a puddle. Somewhere, a siren wailed and faded. Life continued its indifferent rhythm. And there, in that small, damp room, wrapped in the smell of rain and detergent, Amali decided she would not vanish. Not into memory, not into bitterness, not into the city's noise. The 100 Rand note lay there on the nightstand, catching the weak light from the bulb. It wasn't much, a single piece of paper, but it had survived the storm, and in some quiet, unspoken way, so had she. The rain picked up again, pattering against the windowpane in soft, steady rhythm. She lay back down, watching the shadows move across the ceiling like waves. Her breathing slowed. In the silence that followed, the faintest flicker of something new began. Not hope yet, but the first heartbeat of it. And outside, Johannesburg kept raining, washing the city clean for those who still believed in morning. The light above her flickered like it couldn't decide whether to die or burn brighter. Amali sat on the thin mattress of room 17, cross-legged, shoulders wrapped in a hotel towel too short to warm her. The walls peeled like sunburnt skin. A faint buzzing came from somewhere near the ceiling, maybe a dying fly, maybe the light, maybe her nerves. She counted her money again. 40 Rand gone for one night's roof. 60 left. Her fingers moved slowly, counting each bill like a ritual. It wasn't just paper now. It was time. It was possibility. It was how long she could breathe before the city swallowed her whole. The smell of mildew hung in the air. Her shoes, soaked from the storm, sat near the door, tongues pulled open like gasping mouths. The city was quieter now. Rain had thinned to a whisper, the kind that made you feel watched. She needed food. She pocketed the remaining bills, slipped on her damp sneakers, and stepped into the hallway. Her footfalls echoed on the stairs. The lobby was empty, except for a rusted ceiling fan rotating with a groan, slow and useless. Outside, the morning smelled of petrol, wet bricks, and old coffee grounds. She crossed the street to the corner filling station, drawn by the fluorescent hum and the promise of light. Inside, it smelled like melted plastic and sugar. She moved through the aisles like someone underwater, slow, careful, watching. 2 packets of instant noodles, a sleeve of dry biscuits, a plastic bottle of water. Her fingers closed around them like they might vanish if she blinked too long. She stepped toward the counter. The boy behind it couldn't have been more than 19. He wore a cap with the brim frayed and a name tag half peeled off. His eyes caught hers, and for the briefest moment, something passed between them. Not pity, not charity, just the quiet knowledge of 2 people who've seen nights that didn't end with a blanket. His name, barely legible, read Tebaho. "You okay, sister?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. He glanced at her clothes, still damp, hair tangled, lips pale, and said nothing more, just scanned the items. Then she saw it. The Ubuntu Lotto stand, tucked beside the tobacco display. The banner above it flapped slightly from the ceiling fan's breath. Jackpot. 10,000 Rand. Her eyes fixed on the numbers. She almost turned away, almost walked out. Then her hand moved to her jacket pocket. She unfolded the same 100 Rand bill Kwame had thrown at her like it was trash. It looked different now, stiffer from drying, the creases more like scars than folds. She took a 10, not the best one. She picked the one that had caught the corner of that puddle on the sidewalk. "Tebaho," she said, voice low. "1 lotto ticket." He blinked, surprised, then slid over the slip. "You want to choose the numbers?" She didn't answer. She reached for the stubby pencil on the counter. Her hand hovered over the form. Then, without fully realizing, she marked 03, their wedding day. 09, the number of the house they shared. 15, the day his mother died in her arms, and he didn't speak to her for a week. 27, her own birthday, the one he always forgot. 33, the age her mother would have been. Powerball, 10, the number on the crumpled bill. She passed it back. Teboho took the form, slid it into the machine. The printer spat out the small slip, still warm. He handed it to her, watching her face. "Good luck," he said. She didn't smile, just nodded and tucked it between the pages of a tiny notepad she carried with her, an old one from her job days, now half blank. She folded the ticket once, then again. "Thank you," she said softly. He didn't ask why she chose those numbers. He didn't need to. Outside, the sun broke through for the first time in 2 days. Back in room 17, she laid the food out like an offering. She boiled the noodles using the kettle she found hidden under the sink, ate with a plastic fork from the gas station, slow and quiet. Each bite filled more than just her stomach. The wind whispered through the window's cracked seal. The lotto ticket sat folded on the nightstand now, next to the 50 rands she had left. She stared at it, not because she believed she'd win, but because she wanted to mark the moment she refused to let someone else define her worth. She wasn't playing to get rich. She was making a statement, whispered into the face of every insult that ever told her she wasn't enough. By nightfall, she curled under the scratchy blanket. The storm returned in soft bursts, tapping against the window pane like cautious fingers. But something in her had quieted. For the first time in days, her heart didn't race. She looked toward the lotto ticket, closed her eyes, and let herself imagine something she hadn't dared before. What if? Just what if? She didn't want a mansion, or a car, or jewelry. She wanted a door that couldn't be slammed in her face, a room where no one shouted her worth across a threshold, a space where she didn't have to count minutes before the next apology that never came. She wanted freedom. And maybe this little piece of paper was the beginning. Or maybe it was just a folded lie she told herself to sleep better. But either way, for tonight, it gave her a full belly and a full breath. She reached out in the dark and touched the edge of the ticket, barely feeling the paper beneath her fingertips. Then, without another thought, she turned on her side, tucked the ticket back between the notepad pages, and slid both under her pillow. Rain drummed on the roof. The hum of the hallway bulbs seeped through the door frame. Somewhere in the building, someone laughed. Somewhere else, someone cried. But in room 17, Amali finally fell asleep without fear. She dreamed of nothing, only stillness, only silence. And in the morning, when the sun tried again to pierce the gray sky, the only sound was the flicker of light over the small bedside table, where a folded lotto ticket waited, nestled between pain and defiance. The same 100 rand bill lay beside it, now smoothed, pressed flat between 2 pages of that notepad like a fossil of a storm. She'd never spend it, not now, not ever. Some things, once thrown at you, lose the right to be currency. The power flickered once, twice, then steadied. Amali opened her eyes to the dim room of Savannah Lodge. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. The ceiling hummed softly with the sound of water dripping somewhere beyond the plaster. Her breath fogged slightly in the chill morning air. She reached for the edge of her blanket, wrapping it tighter. The silence felt heavy, too quiet for a city like Johannesburg, as if the world was holding its breath for something. The small television on the wooden shelf buzzed faintly, casting a weak glow across the room. She hadn't touched it since the night she checked in. The remote lay next to her Bible and the notepad where she had hidden the folded lotto ticket. She sat up slowly. Her head ached from poor sleep. Outside, cars hissed along the wet street. Somewhere downstairs, a kettle whistled, and someone laughed in a language she didn't know. It felt like life continued elsewhere. While she floated in a pause, no one noticed. When she turned on the television, the screen filled with static first. White snow, soft hiss. Then color bled in, a talk show, a news clip. Then a man in a bright jacket standing in front of a board covered in numbers. Her stomach tightened. Ubuntu Lotto. Saturday draw 10 million rand jackpot. Her fingers froze midair. The host's voice rang with cheer, far too loud for the tiny room. "Good evening, South Africa. Let's find out who's about to change their life tonight." Amala leaned forward, barely breathing. The rain outside beat against the window like a racing heart. The numbers began to appear one by one on the screen. Her pulse jumped. She blinked, shaking her head slightly. Her mouth went dry. Her chest tightened. Her hands began to shake. Then the host grinned and said, "And the Powerball number is 10. She didn't move. The noise of the room, the TV hum, the dripping water, the muffled traffic, all fell away. Her mind went blank except for the sequence echoing in her head. 03, 009, 15. 27, 33, Powerball, 10. Her numbers, every single one. She stared at the screen as the host kept talking, showing confetti, smiling families, the sound of applause. Her body felt far away from itself. Her throat burned as if she hadn't swallowed in hours. The ticket. Her eyes darted to the notepad. Her hands trembled as she pulled it open. Between the pages, the paper lay folded twice, edges soft from her touch. She opened it. The printed numbers stared back at her like ghosts who'd come to claim a promise. The air in the room thickened. She tried to breathe, but her lungs refused. She dropped the ticket on the bed, pressed both palms over her face, and let out a small, broken laugh. It started low, unsure, then grew louder, half sobbing, half laughing, as if her body couldn't tell the difference anymore. She had won. She had actually won. For a long while she sat like that, shaking, the room spinning around her. The laughter died out, leaving only the sound of her breathing and the rain hammering the glass. She reached for the Bible. Its leather cover was cracked and soft. She placed the lotto ticket inside, between the pages her mother used to read aloud when life was too cruel to make sense. Her fingers lingered there. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper through memory, "Riches test the soul more than hunger ever could." Amali knelt beside the bed. The thin carpet scratched her knees. Her head bowed. She whispered to the dark, "If you gave this to me, don't let it destroy me." Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed dry this time. She didn't want greed. She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. But she knew, deep down, that peace was never free. A sharp knock on the wall startled her. She froze, heart racing. It wasn't someone at her door. Just the neighbor maybe, bumping furniture. But still, she rose and locked the handle, double-checked the window latch. Instinct whispered that she had to be careful now, very careful. She returned to the bed and turned off the TV. The silence that followed was almost sacred, heavy with invisible weight. The city outside kept roaring, but inside room 17, something vast had shifted. Amala sat there, hands folded on her lap, the Bible resting beside her like an anchor. The rain slowed to a drizzle. A faint light touched the window pane, the kind that came before dawn, when the world looked washed and new. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, had just been woken by the same numbers. The thought lingered like a shadow. She tried to rest, but her mind spun with fragments. Kwame's voice saying she was worth 100 rand. His face under that porch light, the sound of the door slamming, the note in her hand. And now this, what was she worth now? She pressed the Bible against her chest, closed her eyes and whispered again, "Don't let this kill what's left of me." When morning came, the city was alive again. Vendors shouted, engines started, and rainwater steamed off the roads. Amali dressed quietly, every movement slow and deliberate. She tucked the Bible into her bag, zipped it closed, and glanced once more at the mirror. The woman staring back looked different, not beautiful, not rich, but anchored. A quiet steadiness had settled in her eyes, the kind that came only after walking through storms alone. She didn't smile, not yet. Downstairs, the clerk barely looked up when she passed. Outside, the air smelled of oil and bread. Across the street, a man sold umbrellas that flapped in the wind like black wings. Amali kept walking until she reached a small cafe. She ordered tea, her first in weeks, and sat by the window, holding the warm cup between both hands. On the cafe's television, the news anchor was replaying the lotto results, showing the ticket numbers in bold. "One winning ticket sold," the voice said, "at a fuel station in central Johannesburg." Amala froze mid-sip. That was to Boho's station. A chill crawled up her arms. She imagined his face, that kind kindness in his eyes. Did he remember her? Did the camera outside catch her? She lowered her head, heart pounding. The tea cooled between her palms. The cafe around her blurred, only that voice echoing. "One winning ticket sold." The words circled like vultures. She realized then the true weight of her fortune. It wasn't the money, it was visibility. Someone would start looking. Someone always did. She left the cafe before finishing her drink. The air outside hit her face, sharp and cold. She walked fast, clutching her bag tight against her chest. When she reached the lodge, she climbed the stairs 2 at a time, locked her door, and sank to the floor, shaking. The Bible thudded softly inside her bag. She pulled it out, opened to the page where the ticket was hidden, and stared at it again, those printed numbers that had already changed everything. They looked harmless, ink on paper, but they glowed faintly under the light, like a secret burning too bright to keep. She wrapped it in tissue, then slipped it back inside the Bible. Then she hid the Bible beneath the mattress. Outside, thunder rolled far away. Amala sat against the wall, knees drawn to her chest. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just breathed. Rain started again, slow and steady. In her mind, Kwame's voice returned, cold as ever. "That's what you're worth." She whispered to the empty room, "Not anymore." The power flickered once more, the bulb dimming to a soft gold. Her reflection in the window looked older, calmer. A faint curve of her lips appeared. Not joy, not triumph, but something quieter, something dangerous even. It was the beginning of a reckoning she couldn't yet name. And outside, as lightning crawled across the distant sky, the city of Johannesburg carried on, unaware that in a small, damp room on the second floor of a budget lodge, a woman who once counted coins now held the weight of 10 million rand, and the storm that would follow. She sat there until the light went out completely, and the only thing left was the sound of her heartbeat, steady and alive. Then in the dark, she whispered the last thing before sleep took her. "Whatever this is, I'll face it." The wind pressed against the window, like someone testing how strong the glass was. And Amala, eyes half open, fingers resting on the book beneath her mattress, did not flinch. The elevator creaked like it had a secret to tell. Amali stood inside it, gripping her bag so tightly the straps dug into her palm. The walls were brushed steel, reflecting fragments of her face, her scarf, the slight tremble in her shoulder. Floor numbers lit up one by one, ding, pause, ding, as if the building itself measured the weight of her decision. Outside the glass doors on the 6th floor, Johannesburg glittered through a veil of fog and smog, busy and indifferent. The receptionist had barely glanced at her when she asked to see Ms. Zuri Okafor. Now, standing in the narrow hallway, she took a breath she didn't feel ready for and knocked twice. The door opened with a soft hiss. The office inside was warm wood and quiet power, deep mahogany bookshelves, a long window framing the city, the scent of something citrus and faintly sweet. Behind the desk sat a woman whose presence seemed to hold the room still. She wore no makeup, no perfume, just a fitted gray blouse and an expression that didn't blink easily. Her eyes were dark and alert, but not unkind. She looked up from a file and said simply, "You must be her." Amala nodded, barely able to find her voice. "Yes, I'm here because I won." Zuri motioned to the chair across from her. "Sit. Talk slowly." Amali unzipped her bag. She took out the Bible, opened it carefully, and pulled out the folded lotto ticket wrapped in tissue paper. She placed it gently on the desk, like it might explode. "I don't want anyone to know," she said. Zuri leaned forward, scanned the numbers, then glanced at the date. Her brows didn't move, but her fingers tapped once against the desk. "This is valid. It hasn't expired. You're holding a storm in your hands." "I know." Zuri sat back in her chair. "Tell me everything, from the beginning," Amali told her. Not the whole story, just the parts that mattered to this moment. The eviction, the ticket, the hiding, the silence. Zuri listened without interruption. When Amali finished, she asked one question. "Were you still legally married when you bought the ticket?" Amali's heart skipped. "Yes, but I was no longer living in the house. He kicked me out." Zuri stood, walked to a bookshelf and pulled out a thick black binder. She flipped to a tab marked Asset Protection. "If you bought this ticket after you were forced out, and if we can prove you were no longer cohabiting as husband and wife," she said, "the winnings can be shielded. But you need to move fast. You need to become invisible." Amali looked at her, eyes wide. "How do I do that?" Zuri pulled a blank document from a drawer. "We create a trust, something neutral, Limpopo Trust. It receives the money. You don't. Not publicly. We file the claim through that entity. No names get tied to the headlines, no interviews, no photos, just shadows." Amala hesitated. "A trust for me?" Zuri met her gaze. "A trust for your future, a wall between you and anyone who thinks they have a claim to what's yours. This is your shield." Amali looked down at her hands. Her fingers were raw from gripping too tightly for too long. She reached for the pen. Her hand hovered. "What happens after I sign?" Zuri's voice softened, just barely. "You begin again, but know this. Money doesn't heal, it only reveals." Amali looked up at her. "That's what I'm afraid of." Zuri nodded. "Good. Fear keeps you careful, but don't let it become the driver." Amali signed. Her name, once just something she wrote on job applications and rental forms, now sat atop a legal document worth 10 million rand. The air shifted. Zuri stamped the form, slipped the lotto ticket into a folder, and locked it in her safe. From this moment forward, no one knows. Not your neighbors, not your friends, not your enemies. Amali stood slowly. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Zuri walked her to the door. Before Amali stepped out, she paused. "Why are you helping me?" Zuri didn't smile. She just said, "Because I once walked into a lawyer's office with a black eye and a winning ticket, and she didn't laugh at me." Amali blinked. The hallway outside buzzed with faint city noise. Zuri added quietly, "And because you came in with a Bible, not a shopping list." Amali stepped into the corridor. The door clicked shut behind her. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the street still shimmered with leftover light. Clouds hung low over the city, pressing down like a weight no one could see. She walked slowly, unsure of where to go. There was no one to call, no one she trusted enough to tell. She turned a corner, entered a small cafe, ordered plain rooibos tea, and took a seat in the back. The cup trembled slightly in her hand. Her eyes scanned the room, not out of paranoia, but because she now understood something irreversible had begun. People moved past her without noticing. She sipped her tea, let the heat settle in her chest. In her pocket was a receipt from the lawyer's office. On the back, she had scribbled 3 words: "I still choose." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't defiant, it was just real. On her way back to Savannah Lodge, a small boy selling lollipops stopped her at the corner. He held out a cheap plastic rose. "It's not real," he said, "but it lasts longer." She bought it for 5 rand. Back in room 17, she placed the rose in an empty water bottle. It stood crooked, pink, and ridiculous. But it didn't wilt. She stared at it for a long time. The city buzzed outside her window. Sirens, horns, laughter, life. But inside her, the quiet was starting to bloom again. Not the silence of defeat, but the calm before something sacred. She pulled out her notepad. Beneath the lotto stub, she wrote, "Limpopo Trust. One name, one chance, one quiet life." She closed the book, slid it beneath her pillow. Rain began again, light, rhythmic, like footsteps on a rooftop. Amali lay down fully clothed, one arm tucked beneath her head, the other resting over her chest. Her lips moved, barely audible. "I'll carry it, but I won't let it carry me." The lights dimmed. Outside, the city spun. But in room 17, a woman who once curled beneath storm clouds now had her own kind of thunder, quiet, lawful, and lined in the signature ink of a woman who had just chosen her name over her noise. And though the money hadn't touched her account yet, the change had already begun. Tomorrow, someone would start asking questions. But tonight, she slept with the door locked, a plastic rose on the table, and a signed trust under her breath. Someone said her name. Amali froze mid-sweep, broom angled beneath the wooden bench near the reception. She'd been cleaning the entrance of the women's shelter when the sound slipped through the open door from the sidewalk outside. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks. But then she heard it again, her full name, not shouted, but said with a kind of breathless excitement. She walked slowly to the entrance, wiping her hands on her apron. Across the narrow street, just past the intersection, the neighborhood hair salon buzzed with chatter, curlers, and soap opera music. The awning flapped lazily in the morning breeze, and from inside, she caught fragments. Woman from Savannah Lodge, won the Ubuntu, quiet girl, used to wear the same sneakers every day. She stepped back. Her heart dropped. She hadn't told a soul, not at the shelter, not at the cafe. She didn't even keep the ticket anymore. Zuri had locked it away, and yet her name had leaked like ink through paper. Inside the shelter, the kitchen smelled of lentils and old onions. The walls held quiet stories, bruise-colored silence, women folding laundry without meeting each other's eyes. someone humming too softly to name the song. This place was not meant for miracles, and yet she'd begun to rebuild herself here, brick by invisible brick. Now the walls felt thinner. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was Lindiwe. They hadn't spoken in months, not since that last dinner, back when Amale still tried to smile through her crumbling marriage, nodding politely as Kwame bragged about business deals that never existed. Lindiwe had once been her closest friend, but closeness faded when you stopped having things to lie about together. Amale let the phone ring. She almost didn't answer, but something in her gut twisted. She picked up. "Please tell me it's not true," Lindiwe whispered. No greeting, no preamble. "Kwame was at Josie Lounge last night, drunk out of his mind, shouting that you hit the jackpot. Said he was going to get his rightful share." Amale didn't respond. Her breath caught. Lindiwe continued, voice shaken. "Someone must have leaked it. The news is circling fast. He said he's done being patient." Amala closed her eyes. It hadn't even been a full week since she sat across from Zuri, signing the documents that split her past from her future. And now, the past was clawing its way back, teeth bared. The next day, he came. She saw the black SUV before she saw his face. The shine on it looked new. Maybe rented, maybe borrowed. But it parked right outside the shelter like it belonged there. She was bringing down trash bags when the door swung open. Kwame stepped out. He wore a leather jacket, the kind he used to mock on other men. His sunglasses hung low on his nose, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to show a gold chain she didn't recognize. "Amale," he said, voice soft, like the old days, like honey gone stale. She didn't move. Her hand clutched the trash bag tighter. "I heard," he continued. "I heard, and I know you probably hate me. But listen, we can fix this. Together." She let the silence stretch. "You're still my wife," he said. "Legally, spiritually." He stepped closer. "I messed up, but we're family. We can manage this. 10 million. Amale, think what we could do." She looked at him. The man who once threw her into the rain like a stranger. The man who watched her walk away holding a soaked suitcase and said nothing. She reached into her pocket and pressed record on her phone. "I don't want much," he continued. "Just half. That's fair, right? You wouldn't have even picked those numbers if not for the life we built together." She blinked slowly. Her voice came quiet but steady. "You had half of me for 9 years." He paused. "I want the rest for myself." His jaw clenched. The charm slipped. "I was the one who brought you to Joburg, paid your way, put food on the table. You owe me more than words." Her phone kept recording. She didn't blink. "Remember," he said, stepping closer, voice lowering, "courts see things clearly. We're still married. They'll say the money's ours." Amala tilted her head slightly, then let them see everything. He looked confused. She gave him a faint smile, the kind people wear at funerals. "Starting with the doorbell footage from that night. The neighbors kept it. So did I." Kwam's confidence cracked. She didn't wait for a reply. She walked past him, dumped the trash in the bin, and stepped back into the building. The wind tugged her braid as she closed the door behind her. From the lobby window, she watched him get back in the SUV. He didn't drive off immediately. He sat still, staring through the windshield like the world had shifted beneath him, and he wasn't sure how to stand on it anymore. Back upstairs, she played the recording, saved it to the cloud, sent it to Zuri. Later that night, the shelter's common room glowed with low light. The women sat in scattered circles, some knitting, some reading, some staring at nothing. Amale sat by the window with a cup of ginger tea, her legs tucked under her, hands wrapped around the warmth. The plastic rose still stood on her nightstand, bent from the sun, but stubborn. She looked at it now, thought about how it never wilted, even when everything around it did. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Zuri. "Be ready. He's going to push this into court." She stared at the screen, not surprised, not shaken, just ready. The moon hung low over the city. The streetlights flickered. Her reflection in the glass didn't look afraid anymore, just tired, but solid, like someone who had already lost the most valuable thing and learned to breathe anyway. She whispered, "Let him come." From the room behind her, laughter broke out over a joke someone told. The kind of laughter that survived bruises and broken glass. And in that moment, surrounded by quiet strength, Amali felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't feel small. The courtroom smelled like wax and cold coffee. Amala sat in the second row, spine straight, hands folded in her lap like folded wings. The wooden benches groaned beneath shifting bodies. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, sterile and cruel. Outside, Johannesburg simmered under spring heat. Inside, it was winter. Kwame sat a few feet ahead, flanked by his attorney, a man with slicked hair and an accent that tried too hard. Kwame wore a navy suit. New. He kept adjusting the cuffs like the fabric didn't quite belong to him. The judge entered. Robes brushed the floor. People rose. Silence dropped like a stone. Amali didn't look at her ex-husband. She didn't need to. She'd memorized every gesture, every lie, every time he'd flinch when pressed. He would perform. She knew, but so would she. Zuri leaned toward her. Stay still. Let truth do the talking. The bailiff called the case. Diallo versus Ndlovu. Kwame's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, my client seeks a fair division of shared marital assets, specifically a lottery prize acquired during the legal duration of their marriage. He used the word shared like it meant kindness. He painted a picture of sacrifice. That Kwame had supported Amali for years, that he endured emotional distance, that he was blindsided when she disappeared without explanation and miraculously became a millionaire overnight. Amali stared straight ahead, her knuckles tightened in her lap. Then it was Zuri's turn. She moved like wind, measured, quiet, sharp. My client was evicted from her marital home without notice, assistance, or cause, she began, voice calm, clipped. She was forced to seek shelter at a budget lodge, Savannah Lodge to be precise. It was there, and only there, that she purchased the lottery ticket, using funds she had salvaged from the very act of being cast out. She tapped the screen on her laptop. The judge glanced toward the projector. A video appeared, a grainy clip from a neighbor's doorbell camera. Kwame, shouting, throwing a duffel bag, a crumpled banknote following it like punctuation. Amale standing in the rain, silent. Gasps rose, then stillness. Zuri didn't pause. Text messages exchanged between Mr. Diallo and a woman named Naledi, explicit, time-stamped, and dated 3 weeks prior to the incident, will further clarify the plaintiff's intentions during this marriage. Screens flashed, screenshots, messages dripping in innuendo and emoji hearts. Kwame shifted in his seat. His lawyer fumbled with papers. Furthermore, Zuri continued, audio recording from the defendant's hallway captures Mr. Diallo confronting her post-jackpot, demanding half of the prize, not out of reconciliation, but leverage. She tapped again, Amala's voice, low but clear. You had half of me for 9 years. I want the rest for myself. The courtroom froze. No rustle, no cough. Not even the buzz of the ceiling lights could cut through that sentence. Kwame's lawyer tried to object. Zuri countered before he finished speaking. The judge nodded once, then spoke.
Mr. Diallo, he said, voice level. You claim to be the abandoned party, but these messages, this footage, paint another story.
Kwame stood, voice tight. She left me when I needed her most. She never worked. I carried us. I built everything. Zuri raised a brow. Built what, sir? We have no bank records. No joint savings, only a stream of liquor store receipts and nightclub withdrawals. There's no evidence you carried anyone but yourself. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked at Kwame. In one message to Naledi, you wrote, I told her she's worth 100 rand. I made her believe it. He looked up. You say you supported her, but your words suggest something else entirely. Kwame opened his mouth, then shut it. The judge nodded slowly. It seems, sir, you did not lose a partner. You lost control. He turned to Amala. Her eyes met his, unflinching. Do you wish to speak? He asked. Amala stood. She didn't raise her voice, didn't tremble. I gave him everything, she said. My time, my care, my silence. I bent myself to fit the space he offered and called it marriage. He gave me a house, yes, but no home. When I won, I didn't celebrate. I prayed it wouldn't break me. She paused. Let the air settle. I'm not here to fight over money. I'm here because he tried to take my name again, tried to reduce my worth to what fit in his palm. I won't let him. The judge nodded once, then turned his attention back to the bench. 30 minutes later, he read the ruling. Kwam's claim was denied. Amali's winnings, protected by the Limpopo Trust, were hers alone. The courtroom emptied slowly. Kwame exited without a word. No apology, no look back, just the sound of his shoes on the tile, echoing smaller than before. Outside, the air was thick with heat, a storm threatening. Zuri lit a cigarette, offered one to Amale. She declined. "I don't smoke." Zuri smiled. "You do now, just not with fire." Amali let out a long breath. Her knees felt soft, but her chest solid. Across the courtyard, a young clerk ran past, files tucked under one arm. The world spun on. Zuri looked at her. "You understand what happens next?" Amali nodded. "They'll talk, more than before." Zuri gestured to the courthouse behind them. "Let them." The law spoke louder. Amali reached into her purse, pulled out a photo, creased and faded, of her as a young girl beside her mother. It had lived in her wallet through everything. She didn't say anything, just stared at it, then folded it gently and tucked it back inside. As they walked toward the car, a drop of rain hit her shoulder. She looked up. Clouds moved like bruises across the sky. Amali didn't flinch. She welcomed the rain this time, and for the first time in her life, it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like cleansing. The camera flashed. She didn't blink. Amali stood at the corner of Meyer and Voss Street, waiting for the pedestrian light to change, when the headline glared at her from the front page of Josie Daily. Someone on the sidewalk dropped the newspaper by accident, page fluttering, headline bold in black. "Woman wins $7 million after court victory. Husband denied share." No name, no face, just a grainy silhouette beneath an umbrella and a line that read, "Sources say the winner once resided at Savannah Lodge." Her fingers clenched in her coat pocket. The light turned green. She walked. That evening, Amali moved into a modest second-floor apartment just outside Melville. 2 rooms, a narrow balcony, and curtains the color of burnt tea leaves. The building was quiet, older than most, and smelled faintly of old varnish and rainwater trapped between bricks. She unpacked slowly, a book of poems, a small kettle, her mother's wooden comb, polished soft from years of use, the Bible, now with dog-eared pages that bore her name, sweat, and prayers. The apartment had no television. That was intentional. Instead, she sat most nights on the balcony with a cup of warm rooibos, watching lights flicker across the city like stars that forgot their place. The calls came, of course, numbers she didn't know, reporters asking just a few words, men she hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly remembering birthdays, even 2 relatives she barely recalled inviting her for a family celebration. She answered none of them. She volunteered more hours at the shelter. She bought new sneakers for a girl who didn't speak for 3 weeks after arriving. She funded an extra pantry fridge when the old one broke and said nothing about it. Amali lived small on purpose. She wasn't hiding. She was choosing what to carry. On the first Monday of the next month, she took a long walk. The sky hung low, clouds like thick breath above the rooftops. Her steps led her back toward the filling station near Savannah Lodge. She didn't know if she meant to go there or if her feet remembered a debt her heart never forgot. The windows were still streaked with old fingerprints and dusty sunlight. Tebaho was there, same cap, same half-peeled name tag. When he saw her, he froze. For a long moment, she just looked at him, not with distance, not with fear, but with something clear. She pulled a plain white envelope from her coat pocket. No stamp, no seal. She placed it on the counter and slid it forward. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said quietly. He frowned slightly, then picked it up. Before he could speak, she added, "You didn't treat me like someone broken." He hesitated, the corner of his mouth twitching. "I remember that night. You looked like you needed something more than just noodles." Amala nodded. "Turns out I did." She turned and walked out before he could open it. Inside the envelope, beneath a typed scholarship letter and a bank-certified transfer receipt made out to his daughter's name, were 5 words written in pen. "Thank you for seeing me." Back at her apartment, Amali stood by the kitchen window, peeling an orange. The smell rose bright and sharp, stinging her eyes. She didn't cry. Not today. On the wall above her desk hung a small glass frame. Inside it, the 100 Rand note. flattened, pressed, its corners still a little frayed. She'd never used it, never would. That note was no longer currency. It was evidence of pain, of value, of how someone can be thrown out into a storm with nothing but their breath and still rise without shouting. The next morning, the sky cleared for the first time in days. She walked to the garden behind the shelter and helped plant marigolds with two women who barely spoke. One of them, tiny, sharp-eyed, missing 3 front teeth, pointed to Amali's hands. "You dig like you've done this before." Amali smiled, dirt under her nails. "I've dug myself out of worse." They both laughed, and it felt like truth. That afternoon, a young girl at the shelter, maybe 13, approached her while she was organizing donated clothes. The girl hesitated, then asked, "Is it true you used to live here?" Amala paused. "Yes." The girl bit her lip. "And now you have a car and everything?" Amali shook her head. "I have my name back. That's more than enough." The girl didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. And later that night, Amali placed a folded sheet of paper on her bedside table. A checklist. It didn't have numbers or dollar signs, just words. Peace, safety, kindness. Silence that heals, not hides. A door that doesn't slam. She added one more. Never again ask for permission to matter. Then she crossed out ask and wrote wait, and then crossed that out too. At sunrise, she opened her window. The breeze carried no threat, no smoke, just the sound of a city that no longer had its teeth in her neck. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Zuri. "Still choosing quiet, I see." Amali typed back, "Not quiet, peace, they're different." Then she placed the phone face down. The plastic rose still sat in the kitchen, near the orange peels. It had faded now. Its pink turned almost white, but it hadn't collapsed. Neither had she. She didn't win by shouting. She didn't win by proving anything. She won by walking away and never looking back, by staying whole when the world kept trying to break her in half, by knowing that some victories weren't meant for the headlines. They were meant for the walls of small apartments, the silence of a woman sleeping soundly, the scent of marigolds blooming where no one thought to plant them. The room smelled like chalk, damp wood, and shared survival. Amali stood at the front of the community hall, her hands clasped lightly in front of her. Her breath misted slightly in the early morning chill, even though the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the electric heater in the corner clicked to life. Rows of folding chairs filled the space, most already occupied by women with tired eyes, strong hands, and backs that had carried more than they ever said aloud. Some held babies, some held one another, all of them looked toward her. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she walked over to the table beside her and lifted the glass frame, thin, simple, with a wood border she had sanded herself, and placed it gently on the stand in the center of the room. The 100 Rand note inside had faded only slightly, the ink now softer, the crease lines more delicate, but the weight of it was heavier than ever. She turned to face them. "There was a time," she began, "when I believed my worth lived in someone else's wallet, when I thought being loved meant being tolerated. That silence was a kind of safety." No one moved. A woman in the second row leaned forward. A girl near the back folded her arms tightly, like hugging a secret. Amala continued, "Then one night I stood outside my own house, barefoot, soaking wet, holding a bag of clothes and this." She gestured to the frame. "He threw it at me like garbage, like proof of how little I was worth." She stepped closer to the group. Her voice didn't rise. It settled deeper. "I picked it up. I kept walking. That was the first decision I made for myself in years." The lights buzzed once. Rain tapped faintly at the windows, but the hall was still. Behind her on the table was a box of worn notebooks. Each one belonged to a different woman in the shelter, a collection of letters they'd written to their former selves. Amale had started the ritual months ago, on a whim. Now it had become sacred. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a small, folded paper. "This was my page," she said, "the one I wrote and hid for a long time." She unfolded it carefully. Her voice lowered. "I forgive the girl who stayed too long. I honor the woman who walked away. I carry them both in me. But now, I answer only to the name I gave myself." A chair creaked. Someone sniffed quietly. Amali looked up, and for the first time that morning, she smiled. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't radiant. It was steady, a smile that knew its own roots. She walked to the back of the room and placed the 100 Rand frame on the center shelf of the wall where women left photos, poetry, and prayer cards. Right above it, someone had scrawled in charcoal on the brick, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." As she stepped down from the front, a young woman, barely 20, stood up. Her hands shook as she held a folded flannel shirt in front of her like armor. "You helped me," the girl said, voice breaking. "I was going to go back. To him, after he broke my ribs. I thought I couldn't survive without him." Amala turned, listening. "But then you gave me a bus ticket. You didn't even ask my name." The room was silent. The girl walked forward, pulled something from her backpack, a charm bracelet missing most of its pieces, and laid it gently beside the frame on the shelf. "I'm not going back either," she said. Outside, the clouds began to part. Sunlight broke through in long, slow rays. Dust danced in the air like forgiveness. Amali stepped outside as the women began their morning chores. The sidewalk still held puddles from last night's rain. Her boots splashed lightly through one of them, and for a brief moment, the sun caught the water just right, turning a dirty patch of pavement into gold. She paused. The feeling came not like a rush, but a quiet unfolding. She had not simply won something. She had reclaimed something, a name, a voice, a dignity no longer loaned out. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Zuri, just 4 words. "You still choosing peace?" Amala smiled. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. That afternoon, she walked through the public garden near her new apartment. The marigolds she and the others had planted months before now burst from the soil, orange and alive, stubborn in their brightness. She knelt, hands in the dirt. A small plaque beside the first flower bed read, "Planted by survivors, grown with purpose." A little boy ran past, kicking a ball, laughed without hesitation. His mother called to him. He circled back. She scooped him into her arms. Amala watched them, then pulled the folded checklist from her coat pocket, the one she kept since the night she moved out. Most of the lines were already crossed out. She added one more. "Give what you never received," then put the paper away. When she returned home, the light slanted across her apartment just right, casting golden squares on the kitchen wall. The rose was still on the windowsill, faded now, almost white. It leaned slightly toward the sun. She didn't straighten it. She left it exactly as it was. She made a cup of tea, sat down at her small desk, opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "I didn't win the lottery, I found my voice." And below it, smaller, steadier, "They gave me money, I gave myself back." As evening fell, the room grew quiet again. Not the silence of fear, but the hush of knowing you've come full circle. From rain to room, from bruises to blooming, from coin to crown. And though the world outside still turned, still shouted, still forgot, Amali lit a single candle beside the frame of the 100 Rand note and whispered, not to be heard, but to remind herself, "I am the value." The flame flickered once, stayed. The wind rose. The windows trembled. But the light did not go out. There are stories that don't end with fireworks. No grand applause, no headlines carved into gold. But instead, they settle, gently, quietly, into the hearts of those who have known silence too long, who have walked through storms carrying nothing but breath and the echo of their own footsteps. This was never about riches. It was about the moment a person stands, soaked and shivering, and chooses not to go back. It was about how dignity doesn't arrive wrapped in luxury, but in small, defiant acts, folding a crumpled bill into a pocket, saying no without screaming, walking forward without permission. Because worth has never been printed on paper. It cannot be thrown, or torn, or bargained. It lives in the quiet decisions no one sees. To stay kind when the world hardens, to forgive without forgetting, to build without needing applause. Sometimes healing begins not with a breakthrough, but with a room of strangers who understand the same kind of silence. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers. It plants seeds. It gives a name back to someone who forgot they had one. And sometimes the greatest kind of power isn't winning. It's surviving without losing the softness in your hands. It's reclaiming yourself without needing anyone to clap. So if this story found you, Maybe it was meant to remind you, you are not what they called you. You are not the version they gave you. You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are the one who stayed. You are the one who left. You are the one who decided, this ends with me. Thank you for listening with your heart. If this journey moved something in you, quietly or powerfully, we'd love to hear it. Leave a comment below, let us know where you're watching from, and if you'd like to walk alongside more stories like this, please follow and subscribe to our channel. Because somewhere out there, someone else is standing in the rain, and your voice might just be the umbrella they didn't know they needed. Thank you, and take gentle care.